Okay, the first thing to do is not cry here. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you are. My name is Jeff Smith. Like all of you, I'm a friend of Stephen's. My role here today is primarily to MC the event. We have some people very close to Stephen, and his family is here today who will want to say a few words. I'll just say a couple at the beginning, if it's okay, I guess before I lose complete control of the tribute. There's some terrible things, obviously, about the COVID crisis, especially, in times like this when we're grieving and we want the ability to hug one another. But one small advantage, it occurred to me, was that I think there are probably 1,000 people watching this today. People will participate in this tribute and are participating, and thank you for participating, who wouldn't otherwise have been able to be here, from all over Canada, certainly, from some people I know in the U.S. I think we've got one in Australia watching, which, of course, brings me to Stephen. I read a self-help book about 20 years ago, and one of the things it said to do was to sit down and very thoughtfully write out your own eulogy, what you want people to say about you when you leave, and then go live your life that way. That was the advice. I thought it was pretty good advice, but the one good thing about today is you're going to hear the eulogy for Stephen's life that Stephen wrote for himself. And just before we get to it, I got to add a couple things. One is I've been blown away. You're only going to hear half the story today. I was just saying to Mary Frances, by the number of notes and emails that I've received, and of course I'm just one person, many people received lots of others, from people that were inspired and that knew Stephen, who you wouldn't have expected, tons of young people who Stephen touched and inspired and mentored. I have some of the emails I may, if I get a chance, read just excerpts from them, who Stephen listened to. Stephen was a terrific listener, and he inspired people. So I literally got as many notes from these young people as I got from the older people that he knew and who loved him and who he loved. And I just learned what a great part of Stephen's life and legacy all of that was. And I've realized there's a great life lesson we can take from Stephen, and we're going to take it at EllisDon. In fact, I'm saying now we're going to call it from now on the Stephen Damp Leadership Principle, and we'll teach it to as many people as we possibly can. And it's simple. It's this. If you want to be a great leader, help other people. Just do that. And the help that you give them and the success that you give them will be visited back upon you 100-fold and in many different ways. Because it seems to me that's what he did. Now, I have to tell you this story. We had the funeral a week ago today. The family had the funeral, but it was weird because it was COVID and because you could only have 10 people at the service and then 10 people at a time in the funeral home. So it ended up that the funeral, sort of the social part of the funeral, took place in the parking lot of this funeral home up in this little town called Erin. And I want you to try and picture this in your mind's eye. So there's 30 or 40 of us in this parking lot on this beautiful day. And the damp women, as I've come to call them, suggested to me beforehand, or asked me, do you think it would be possible to get a bit of a drive-by for the people who can't come that could just pay their respects? And we said, what a terrific idea that is. Don't worry, we've got that. So we set about organizing it. And the day before, Susie Morris, whom I work with, said, how many cars? We can get a lot, but how many do you think? And I said, well, we don't want to tie up this poor little town of Erin with a big traffic jam. So I think 30 would be about right. Show respect, good number, but not chaos. So anyway, we came out of the visitation. The next day on Thursday, I called Susie on my cell phone, and I said, okay, let's go. And she said, Jeff, there's at least 70 trucks, floats, cars, subcontractors, people I don't know. I said, we'll bring it on. So let's just go. So a few minutes later, they started coming by in this little town slowly. And about 15 cars in, I asked the the Damp family to come down to the curb, and they said, look left. As far as you could see, there were trucks and cars, all with the emergency flashes going with signs. It was terrifically moving. Never would have happened but for COVID, but it was a moment I think Stephen would have been thrilled with. So just a very unique, I'll never forget that. And that's all I wanted to say. Ryan Essex, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. And first off, I want to say, since I have just sincere gratitude to those responsible for asking me to speak today. It's truly a privilege. My deepest condolences again to Mary Frances, Alicia, Cassidy, Maddie, Alana, Sil, Joel, all of Stephen's siblings, extended family and friends. We're all still hurting, and I'm truly sorry for your loss. You know, I met Stephen for the first time over 25 years ago in the Stauffer Library at Queen's University. The library had recently been built, and as a Queen's grad, I thought Stephen would appreciate seeing it. So I booked a small room there for him to interview me for a role at Miller. And funny enough, although the library had been open the year before, it was my first time to the library too. I certainly did not know, nor did I appreciate that day as a fourth-year engineering student, talking about the future with Stephen, what we would end up sharing for the next 25 plus years. First, of course, as a leader and mentor, which extended well beyond our 14 years together at Miller. But that mentorship also went well beyond work. Stephen and Mary Frances, having 4 daughters, about 8 years ahead of when Kendra and I had our 3 daughters, certainly made for some interesting heads up, Ryan, and give us some expectations, you know, what to expect as parents of young ladies. And that advice was golden. He loved his family openly and wanted nothing but the best for them. But Kendra and I could feel it. He wanted that for us too. That's what that advice was about. And to me, that's what set Stephen apart. He cared. He was so genuine and authentic. Small story. My second year at Miller, so I did get the job. My second year at Miller, Stephen visited me on a job site at a project I was working on in Port Perry. And he knew of my upcoming wedding, and he wanted to wish me well. And he had a gift. And this is what it was. He said, you know, Ryan, it's an important time in your life. And I know you only have 1 week's holidays. He says, but take 2 weeks off. Enjoy this important milestone. And like, what a great gift. He didn't have to do that. And at that time in my life and early in my career, I mean, Kendra and I, we've never forgotten that, that thought, that caring. You know, family was important, milestones were important, and they were so valued by Stephen, and he shared that with us. But I will say that over our 25 years together, it was our friendship that I cherished the most. I have so many great memories, fortunate enough to have some great memories with him. But like a lot of you, I thought we still had so much more time to make so many more memories. You know, so thinking about them, it was tough. It was tough because I wasn't prepared to think that way. I thought of our time as families going to the ERA trips together, both our families being down there, down south, our time in Cabo together, our early morning squash games at Timberlane, dinners at home in Aurora at each other's homes. You know, he'd get the green egg charcoal grill going, I'd get the Weber charcoal grilling, and we'd see what would happen. Of course, lots of golfing. Maddie and Alana being fantastic, looking after our young ones as the 4 of us could go out together and, you know, to things like the Prince concert and other just really great, memorable moments. But all of them, they were just great evenings to be together, days to be together, talk about family, be optimistic about the future. But when I thought back on it, it was probably more important was we were just there, like we were present, enjoying life and these moments. They were just fantastic times. I'll never forget them. If you've worked around Stephen, if you've been around Stephen, I think like me, you can't help but admire how positive he was. he was infectious. How practical he could be. Although us splitting on a pressure washer was not, it didn't work out too well for either one of us. I don't know how practical that was. But just how passionate he was about life in general. He was all in. That passion could lead to lateness, as you know. Stephen could be tardy for a few things. But that tardiness didn't come from a lack of respect. It really came from packing in about 50% more in a day than you should. He just was overly optimistic about, let's one more quick meeting or one more quick conversation. He was just overly optimistic about how long that would really take. And he often joked, Ryan, if we're eating dinner before 9 or 10 o'clock anyways, that we just haven't accomplished enough in a day. So it's all good. It's all good. But in those meetings, it was in those moments that I really learned and respected his high morals and ethics. They were just non-negotiables. And his real talent of having and displaying this can-do and work-with attitude. He just exuded it. He took pride. He took a lot of pride in the fact that he never took advantage of gotchas or tried to take advantage or win at someone else's expense. He knew the bigger, much bigger, more rewarding win was a long-lasting relationship with people that was built on trust. I want to share just a few things, though, that I'm really going to miss about Stephen. And first and foremost, it's the random calls. We'd call each other out of the blue, and I love seeing his name pop up on my phone. And it might just be to say, hey, how are you doing? How's the family? He could be calling to see what you thought or get your perspective on what was going on within our industry or the world. He really wanted your opinion. He cared what you thought. And I'm just really going to miss those out of the blue calls where I look at my phone and there's Stephen Damp calling. I'm going to miss the quick Sunset Grill breakfast, the last minute late afternoon beverages. But of course, it's our twice annual excursions at TAC. All across Canada, these were some of the best times, the latest nights, the earliest mornings, but they always included the greatest, most insightful conversations you could ever have. Abe Lincoln is quoted as saying, most folks are as happy as they make up their minds to be. Anyone who's been around Stephen knows he made his mind up every day to be very happy and optimistic. I'm really going to miss that optimism. Just the way he entered the room. His positive energy came right in behind him. His hand gestures, his smile. It was a sometimes wry smile. And of course, the laugh. Just incredible. They really stick with me. But having to really think about this, it's how he made you feel about yourself. I hope we all get to have such an encouraging person in our lives who really pushes you to be your best. But he also sees your best before you do in yourself. And I'll be forever grateful for that, for the time we had together. Endless gratitude for the doors Stephen opened for me personally in my career, in my life. Stephen was an incredible friend. He was unbelievably intelligent too. If you spent any time around him, you knew that. Bob Bugden shared that Stephen even had a U.S. patent, as a co-inventor of a heater scarifier when he was with Harvey Johnson, right? You may or may not have known that. But Stephen, because he was humble, he was never going to brag about such a thing. But even more impressive is that Stephen was a selfless, faith-based family man with great, unwavering character. He impacted people. Jeff just spoke about that. And for that reason, so many came to pay their respects last week in the procession. And it included a significant amount of people and brown and yellow trucks, and equipment from Miller, because he impacted us too in an unbelievable way and was a valued 25-year club member at our company. But I think his impact is greater than that because he lives in all of us. He impacted us in that way. It changes who we are, but nowhere greater than in his 4 daughters. And I would say what stands out to me more than anything with his 4 daughters is this. Maddie, you have the gift of your father's hugs. You give freely of them because you know the positive impact and comfort they have. Alana, your smile, it's sometimes wry too, and your laugh, it's your own. But I see and hear so much of your father in that. Keep it going. Alicia, your knack to bring smiles to those around you, it's incredible. In all situations, it's your dad. It cuts the tension, it relieves pressure, it just puts things into a happier perspective. Cassidy, your wedding with Sil and Joel this past October, was such a gift for all of us in attendance. It was one of the happiest days ever. Your caring heart, the way you listen intently, I see your dad in you in that way. Mary Frances, you were central to Stephen's being. He absolutely adored you, and we will always be here for you and your family. And thank you again from the bottom of my heart for giving me this opportunity to speak. It's a genuine honor. 7 days prior to Stephen's passing, we had a really long conversation, and one I will be forever grateful for. Interestingly, like our first conversation over 25 years ago, our last one, it was about the future too. It was about turning 60 in August. It was about upcoming opportunities. It was about what would be next for us. And it was always about the future. And I'm really going to miss that. And I want to end with this. Throughout time, I have so many memories of Stephen speaking of his mother, Rosemary, saying, "You've heard it. It's a grand old world if we don't weaken." And I can hear him saying it right now. It was usually in moments of trial or simply when things just didn't go as he and I had planned. Stephen would simply say, "Ryan, you know," as my mother would say, and of course we knew the phrase well. And this past 13 days has certainly been one of those times when that phrase really hits home. So back to Queens, to Kingston, where it all began for myself with my friendship with Stephen. The Tragically Hip from that town, they of course have their version of this phrase in a song titled, "It's a Good Life If We Don't Weaken." And there's a line in that song that's always struck me. It says, "Let's get friendship right, get life day to day." In a large part to you, we got friendship right, Stephen. And we did get to live life day to day, and so many great days. He was not one in a million. Stephen was one of a kind. I want to thank you, Stephen, for being you. Rest in peace, and God bless. Thank you.
That was terrific. Just before I turn it over to Jerry, I just want to read an email I got. It's short from a woman named Tina Hollinsworth. I'm devastated to hear. I started my career at PME in Alberta and met Stephen up at Foster Creek in my first month with the company. I had no idea what his position was. He and I chatted about work and life for over an hour. When he left, my PM at the time said, "Did you know who that was?" And I said, "No." And he said, "You talked to that guy like you've known him for years." When oil crashed, I was laid off from PME, and they finally got me back up to Kiosk, the dam project that Steve brought to EllisDon. Stephen happened to be on my flight when I was going up. We hugged and talked about his upcoming grandbaby. He said he was thrilled that I'd made it back. And when I said I'd been hired by BBE, which was the joint venture company, he said, "Leave this to me." And by the next day, I was back to being a full-time EllisDon employee. Over to you, Jerry.
Thanks, Jeff. So we're here today for a tribute to Stephen, our dear friend. Tribute is defined as an act of admiration, gratitude, or respect, and I cannot think of a better word. Thank you, Jeff, for doing this. Welcome, everyone. And my condolences, sincerest condolences to the family. You've probably heard people say you'll never work a day in your life if you love what you do. Stephen's probably said that several times. I agree, but it's not always all that practical. I would say if you can wake up every morning and make a difference, then you've done well. It doesn't have to be big. A smile, a nod can change someone's life. This applies to your work life and your personal life. And in both, Stephen was extremely successful. Our lives are like books, each page a new day, each chapter a new phase with characters introduced throughout. Stephen's book is a tremendous read. It's hard to summarize this book, its impact, its emotion, the effect it had on people. I first met Stephen more than halfway through his book, when I was with MTO and working on a relatively new technology of cold-in-place pavements. Stephen, of course, was with Miller, and as we all know, was an engineer from Queens who graduated from what we thought would have been civil, but indeed it was Eng Phys. I graduated in civil, but I'm pretty sure Stephen knew more about civil than I did. It was a typical contract-owner relationship with give and take on both sides and in shared intent to get the project done. As the owner, my intent was to improve the performance of pavement, and Stephen, as the contractor's intent, was not about improving his profit margin, but to ensure the technology survived because he believed in its value. Sure, Miller had made investments and equipment and personnel like any other contractor, and they needed to make a living. But Stephen's pursuit was to improve both sides of the relationship. He drove changes to maximize the benefits for both parties. Immediately, our relationship grew to a level, or a bigger level, of understanding, respect, and trust, which is unfortunately rare in the contractor-owner relationship. Over time, we entered the next chapter of Stephen's book with Transportation Association of Canada that Ryan mentioned, TAC. Together, we sat on the Chief Engineers Council and the Board of Directors. And TAC, I called it like a summer camp for Stephen. There were so many activities that he could get involved in, so many areas to participate. Never to say no, he was heavily involved in every area, using his skills, his experience and knowledge to mentor young professionals and to better transportation for the nation. He was an active board member, driving jurisdictions to understand the industry issues before they became problems. He expanded his role to the TAC Foundation, where he became president, another chapter we shared in his book. The mission of the foundation is to improve the opportunities for students to provide financial assistance and industry connections, with the goal of the students participating in a career in transportation. Stephen was passionate about the foundation. The foundation's sheer existence is through donations and contributions, and Stephen was our champion, relentlessly pursuing corporate donations, expounding the values of the foundation, and successfully securing the necessary funds that would be used to help students. Working to raise money for a good cause was not new to Stephen. It was, I think, one of the biggest chapters in his book. As we prepared for our TAC Foundation meeting this spring, he told me he was looking forward to putting more time into his charitable works this year, the foundation and cancer research and care. Our relationship through work evolved into a personal friendship that spanned many chapters of his book. Our spouses became close friends. We celebrated dinner together in Kingston when we brought our children together to participate in their first year of engineering. That was Alana and Matthew at Queen's. Together, we shared more dinners and more outings, golf games, whatever it may be. And Stephen and I would compare notes on the most challenging problem facing us, how to best raise our children so they can be happy and successful in life. Throughout Stephen's book, as our friendship grew, two themes became very, very clear. There was nothing more important than his family and his faith. Everything was for his 5 girls, and this extended to include Syl and, of course, his grandson, Joel. His pride beamed when he spoke of his family, and there was nothing he wouldn't do for them. He was looking forward to the next trip, the next adventure, the new grandchildren, and you could feel his excitement. He was thankful for what he had, which fueled his profound faith. He would marvel at the science of the human body and say, "That guy, God, not a bad engineer." Stephen's book had a scary chapter when he was diagnosed with cancer. Like everything, he met it head on, performed his research, knew what was ahead of him, and didn't shy away. In the years following, it was hard to forget he even had it. He wasn't weaker, he was stronger. It didn't seem possible, but he valued his family even more after that. Throughout his book, Stephen loved spending time with people, quality time, listening to people, and people loved spending time with Stephen. He was engaging, entertaining, interesting, and always enjoyable. There was many a time when you would hear just one more at those TAC meetings, and there was always more than one. I'm so happy I stayed and would share the headache with many the following day. Audrey and I visited Mary Frances at the cottage this February. We barbecued on the green egg, we walked the dogs, we went out for dinner, we went to Mass, we had a few drinks with friends. And we even did some trim work on a room he was finishing in the basement. He had a puzzle out that was started around Christmas, and it had numerous contributors to it. It had to be the most difficult puzzle I'd ever seen. It had to be 1,500 pieces. It was huge, and it was pictures inside of pictures inside of pictures. It sounds ridiculous, but this is one of the most cherished memories I have. It brought out the things I saw in Stephen's life, his book, his patience, his perseverance. We celebrated our successes piece by piece. To have that time, 1,500 pieces of time to share. Stephen's book had a puzzled ending. Why so soon? Why so sudden? Why? There's no verbal response to these questions. We have to write that last chapter and respond with actions that carry us forward with his memory. With Stephen's passing, I'm confident there will be numerous honors in his memory, named scholarships, donations to charities. The biggest honor would be to live his values, family, faith, friendship, live his passion for life, for Mary Frances, his children and grandchildren and extended family. His ambition to do better, mentoring others, building teams and relationships in business and in our communities. Live in his kindness, his sharing of time, of love and memories. And live knowing that he is in all of us, looking down on us and caring for us. Stephen's book, it's a good book. It's a really good book. I'm extremely saddened it's over and sorry that not everyone got to read it. Cherish the chapters you have, and together we will honor Stephen in our own books, with each page a new day and each chapter a new face. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. That was terrific. It just strikes me sitting here, I'm sitting here between two clients who aren't here because they're clients, they're here because they're two of Stephen's closest friends who he met as clients. How often does that happen? Wayne, just before I give it to you, I've got to read a bit from one of our employees named Nick Britton. He said, "Not many people or companies, for that matter, would allow a 30-year-old to run civil projects as a superintendent. Stephen had trust in me that I would succeed. He allowed me to make mistakes, learn from them, and be a better leader. And then at the end of last year, he again gave me the opportunity to become a general superintendent, something a young worker would only strive to become much later. I know I still have a long ways to go." Here's the important part. "But Stephen provided me with the stepping stones to get there. We spend more time at work maybe sometimes than we should, but having someone like Stephen give you the opportunities like he did and the example he was, not only made me a better super, but a better husband, father, and a better person." Not bad. Over to you, Wayne. Wayne Carson.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. It's an honor to be here with Stephen's friends and his family to chat about an extraordinary, unique individual. I think Ryan put it best, when Stephen's not one in a million, he's one of a kind. He's somebody, I'll share two thoughts or perspectives on the 25 years that I've known Stephen. One is largely through our pre-EllisDon days, and the other through EllisDon, where we built a wonderful friendship. But Stephen, when I think of him, I have only the most positive memories possible. He was kind, he was generous, he was thoughtful, happy, hilarious. He was so appreciative of everyone and everything. He was always smiling, and just the most enjoyable company that you could possibly find. A common theme that our previous two speakers had are themes that I have in my comments as well. Family, it was evident to anybody that knew Stephen how he treasured his family. He treasured his friends. He celebrated friendships and stayed in touch on a regular basis. Church and faith were important to him. I was on numerous golf trips down south. The rest of us were sleeping in. Stephen was up, and he said, Mary Frances wants me to go to church, and I'm going to go to church. But also the concepts of state and politics. You know, Stephen was very involved in many aspects of politics, had unlimited opinions, and viable solutions to much of what we faced. And of course, when I think of Stephen, I think of work, work, and more work. He had a sense of energy and an ability to get things done that I've not seen in many people in my career. Stephen's life was too short, but it was exceptionally well-lived. He made the most of each and every day. His legacy is a model for all of us to follow, and he simply was a true force of nature. The wonderful obituary that was written by Stephen's family and the email tribute that Jeff sent out to the EllisDon community spoke of Stephen's leadership as a builder of people, and he certainly was. For those that are following our session online, I would encourage you to read the obituary Stephen's family completed. It's an accurate and wonderful tribute to a life really well lived. It's worth appreciating for all of its depth and content and the values and what Stephen brought to us. But in addition to being a builder of people, Stephen was a builder of trusting relationships. I give him credit and acknowledge him as the primary architect of the very unique and special relationship that EllisDon has with our company, Kilmer. It's an unusual relationship given over the 25 years that I've known Stephen. The first 15, we were fierce competitors and fierce rivals. I didn't really know him for those first 15 years. He was leading the Miller group, and I was leading the Warren and later Lafarge groups. And it was a decades-long rivalry that existed. We bid thousands of jobs against each other, where the low bid wins the day. We tracked market share. If we had an asphalt plant on one side of the street, Miller had one on the opposite side. Same for pits and quarries and construction operations every which way. So whenever we were, looking at our strategies and our plans, what Stephen was doing at Miller was at the forefront of our thoughts. He was a great, great leader in the construction industry, and we respect him and we acknowledge him for all that he did on that front. So that first 15 years, I didn't know the man very much, but I'm so thankful and happy that Stephen joined EllisDon. It created an opportunity for a new chapter in our life and our friendship. Stephen joined shortly after we were successful on the En route Highway Service Center P3 project. We had just done a deal. Jeff, you'll recall the circumstances around and the uniqueness of that particular negotiation. The en route deal was complicated to no end. It was the province's first revenue-based public-private partnership. It was negotiated after the 2008 financial crisis. It had a 1,000-page project agreement, which I'm sure Stephen read in about 2 days. There were multiple stakeholders. It was 20 sites over a 1,000-kilometer stretch of highway, all contaminated. Jeff threw him into an incredible hornet's nest of complexity and opportunity. And my team at Kilmer reflected on our past experience with Steve as our competitor and our rival, and we wondered, how is this going to unfold? It's extraordinary the way Stephen learned about the deal, the way he presented himself as a team player, as a true partner. In a complex environment, he identified a whole bunch of win-win opportunities for us. He was tireless in the work and the leadership that he provided to the team. So he created a relationship in the circumstances that had a history of competitive tension, and just simply moved that off the table and allowed us to be successful together. He also looked after EllisDon's interest. Jeff negotiated the deal, and I think he did a good job, Jeff. No, you did a great job. But as Stephen was identifying the win-wins, he called me one day and said, "I'd like to have a beer." And so as we sat around and chatted, he said, "This is a good deal. It's a good opportunity. I've identified a few win-wins, and I know Jeff agreed to A, B, and C, but I'd like you to consider some changes. I think they're fair. I think they reflect the value EllisDon is bringing to the opportunity, and would you consider them?" So we talked through them, and Stephen was right on every one. We changed some of the fundamentals of what we had in our contracts. EllisDon made more money as a result of Stephen's entrepreneurship and his ingenuity, and it was an opportunity for us to see a genius at work and his ability to comprehend this difficult P3 and all the items that were in play in completing this build out for the new en route network. We walked away, the team at Kilmer, with just a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for Stephen, his ability to make partnerships and find win-win outcomes. EllisDon's trademark, I believe, is we build on great relationships. We've seen that for a decade and recognize it as being one of the critical success factors for EllisDon. But I observed that trademark was part of Stephen's DNA and his business approach his entire life. He built on great relationships, and for that we're all very thankful. So to move to a lighter topic, I'd like to chat a little bit about our time on the golf course. We had so many wonderful memories on the golf course. My predominant memory is of Stephen talking and talking and talking. He was a great storyteller. Spending time with him in a golf cart, you had a front row seat to an event within an event. And he was so generous with mulligans. He'd talk in your backswing. You'd hit a bad ball. He'd say, no, I was talking, tee it up and hit again. And I'm fearful that all our golf scores are going to go up without the benefit of Stephen's kind mulligans. Stephen and I, we were always betting. When the bets were settled, we were always renegotiating the bets, attempting to create some form of victory even when one of us was going to lose a match. But it was always in good cheer, always in a respectful manner, and effectively the bet did not matter, but having fun with it did. And that's part of what I'll always treasure. One of our favorite golf stories that my team has, last Thursday for Stephen's funeral, we had a Zoom call with some of my colleagues at the office to talk through Stephen's memory and what he meant to us. And this is absolutely our favorite Stephen story. It speaks to his kindness and his strategic thinking. So EllisDon and Kilmer have been having these annual Ryder Cup 4-on-4 match play events for the better part of the last 10 years. We had events at Pebble Beach, we had events at Kiowa, Jupiter, Cabot, basically wherever there's a great golf course, we all had a passion to try to get out there. In April of 2018, we were at Pinehurst Golf Resort. EllisDon wanted revenge from the prior year, which we named the beatdown at Kiowa, where Stephen, Karen, Tim Smith, and Larry Deere lost 8-0 to the Kilmer team. It was a thrashingly good time, and we all enjoyed it. At Pinehurst, EllisDon upped the ante. They brought in Jeff, their fearless leader, thinking that we wouldn't be afraid to take him on, and they brought in a sandbagger named Andrew Anderson with an apparent index of 27, which
You got to do what you got to do.
you got to do what you got to do. Anyway, at Pinehurst, at the end of Saturday, the score was tied 2-2, heading into the final day Sunday with 4 points up for grabs. We had a lovely dinner and a few drinks in the clubhouse dining room. We all retired to the veranda for cigars and nightcaps, the usual adventures. EllisDon went to bed relatively early. I think they were all tucked in by midnight. The Kilmer crew stayed out for another couple drinks. After the bar closed, we were getting our second wind and we were out of our beverages, so we sent a text up to Stephen and to Kieran, sound asleep, saying, in case you guys happen to get this, we're on the veranda and we could use another round. We didn't know if we'd get an answer, but sure enough, a few minutes later, Stephen shows up, smile on his face, the mini bar in his pocket. With the enthusiasm of Santa Claus at Christmas, he ran around giving us all the beverages we could consume, stayed with us for one drink, went back to bed, had a good night's sleep. Sunday morning comes. EllisDon is rested, Kilmer's a bit tired, we're a little bit under the weather, and we always reflected that, his client-first approach, his friendliness and kindness to us, and also the strategy that he knew if we were up till 4 in the morning, the odds of us winning on Sunday weren't high. So EllisDon righted the competitive ship. This event or outing was renamed the EllisDon Pummeling of Kilmer at Pinehurst, and we've laughed about it many, many times. In closing, one of my memories that I'll treasure with Stephen is that after a golf game, he rarely shook hands. He was not somebody to come up and hold his hand out and say, thank you, that was fun. He always approached you with his arms wide open. Win or lose, he wanted a big hug. He wanted to give you a hug and to be appreciative of the time together with his friends. We'll miss Stephen greatly, but his legacy will continue on in the many fond memories of our friendship, and it'll continue on in the strength of the EllisDon-Kilmer relationship. So to Stephen and your family, our condolences. It's a great life to celebrate. He packed in 59 years, what most people never experienced in a much longer lived life. But I'm very thankful to have come to know the real Stephen over the course of the last decade. So thank you for sharing him with us. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Mike. So I'll just say to the damp women who you'll meet fairly soon that we're expecting great strength from you, because the men have all pretty much burst into tears up here. So you've got to hold up the strong end of the ship. I'm confident that you will. I'm just going to read one more, if that's okay. A guy named Chris Falconer in our Edmonton office, who's our people and culture senior person out there. He said, I've built a close relationship. He said, I'm devastated. I built a close relationship with Stephen, or Mr. Damp, as Dennis Johnson likes to say. He did a lot of funny things that always gave me a chuckle. It was always nice to do my video calls with him while he was at home and could spend time with his family. His hair was usually all wild, the top of his head, but he had a smiling face and a cup of coffee in his hand, and I think that helped with the intense times, because even when he had a tough moment, he would pause, reflect, and then push through with positivity. He was very kind to me in every meeting, and when employees were struggling at work or at home, he would step up and try and help. I felt like a ton of bricks hit me Friday, and I've spent most of my weekend in tears. I remember my last conversation with him yet like it was yesterday, because it was. In whatever way possible, please know what a great pleasure it was to work with him. Max Mantha, over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm so thankful to be able to be here this afternoon to share what a difference Stephen has made in my life. I still can't believe I'm here. I've had the privilege, opportunity, and challenge of having Stephen as my mentor, as my leader, and as my friend in all combinations of those roles for the past 16 years. When I sit back and think about that, and those experiences and those years, all I can think is, how lucky was I? Stephen made people a priority. And hands down, I benefited so much from all he taught me. I hope to share today a few key stories and lessons that he shared with me and that have truly founded my most fortunate career so far. I think they highlight how Stephen led, how he grew people, and the pride and fun he had in doing that. Stephen and my father, Ray Mantha, are very close friends. They met up in New Liskeard in Northern Ontario in the mid-90s, and from there, like many of the stories today, developed a client and then lifelong relationship. And at the Ontario Road Builders Convention, years later, they took a break. They always took a break and just went for a walk and talked about life. And my dad asked Stephen about how can you get Max, or how can we get Max some real experience? And 2 months later, a young, skinny, naive, hopeful summer student, scared out of my mind about going into the Miller Paving office to talk to Mr. Stephen Damp about a potential summer opportunity. And in Stephen fashion, big, gregarious, nice guy, happy guy, he trusted my dad, he saw some potential, and he laid out options. He said, Max, you could have a great summer up in North Bay, learn a lot about construction, and water ski every day if you want. Or you could come down to the city, build some really big projects, and get some real experience. It's all good. It's up to you. Just let me know. And 2 weeks later, there I was, standing on the side of Highway 401, 400 in Black Creek Drive, nowhere near water skiing. I had the option of working day shift and night shift. And it was that summer that marked the beginning of our relationship and just this incredible opportunity that became. Stephen has mentored many people. And his commitment to mentorship isn't just a phone call here and there to check in. He questions me. He challenges me. He cared about me. And he always let me decide. If we all mentored the way Stephen mentored, man, could we set up the next generation in our industry for tremendous success. After 8 years of mentorship, so after that summer, Stephen offered me a job, and I actually went to go work for a different company, CP Rail. He stayed in touch with me. We stayed connected. He followed my career moves. He helped me get my PN. It wasn't about his business. It was about truly mentoring my career. And I called him up. I said, Stephen, this is 8 years into our relationship. I'm thinking about doing my MBA. And it was 3 phone calls long and 3 meetings, and he challenged me and questioned me and made me rethink all my logic about what I was going to do and really helped me make my own decision. And I remember reluctantly calling him after I decided to do it and got accepted. And I called him, in a scared fashion, like, I hope he's going to be okay with that decision. And he could not have been more positive, supportive. That's great, fantastic, let's get at it. And that's the kind of mentor he was. Then, after completing my MBA, Stephen, we talked, and I jumped out. This time, I was smart enough to jump at an opportunity to work for Stephen, and I joined EllisDon and his growing team. And a little while later, similar to 2004, he asked me to go out for breakfast. And I remember it so clearly. He said, "How do you feel about moving to Dublin, Ontario?" And same as the North Bay, downtown Toronto opportunity. He laid out the opportunity. He laid out the options. It was up to me to take it or leave it. There really wasn't pressure to do it, but he saw an opportunity, and there was runway there. And it was a huge ask of him. He had to go to Jeff and the other EllisDon leaders to convince them to let a 30-year-old young engineer try to go figure out how to run a 100-year-old business. And he put his neck on the line for me. And that experience changed everything for me. It made me understand business better. It made me a better leader. It let me spread my wings in a huge way. He let me run. He grilled me. He asked me really, really direct questions on a daily basis. He challenged me on my people decisions. And we started to share his deep understanding of his values and his views and how they were so aligned. As a leader, Stephen is caring. Stephen is so intense with vision. His energy, I could never keep up with his energy. His expectations, though not always clear, were so high. And his value set guided everything he did and everything his team did. Over the years, he worked our team hard. He worked me hard. He worked all, Ryan talked about, he worked all of us so hard. And he always told me running a business is a 24/7 responsibility. But I always found it strange. He never called me on weekends. He always said I could call him, but he would never call me on a Saturday or Sunday. He valued his family so much, and he knew I did as well. For him, above all, family came first. And it's not that work wasn't allowed. It was about intruding in that time. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. And then there we were, years later again in 2017, and Jeff wrote about it in his tribute to Stephen. Stephen went to bat again for me. Young Max, that's the kind of leader and pusher he was. He trusted, he saw an opportunity, and then we'd go for it. Let's go. Same thing. We had breakfast. There were options. It was my choice. And then I came back to Toronto. He loved to grow people. I know today many people watching know what it's like to have Stephen in your corner, pushing you in your career. He wouldn't do it for you, but he'd stick his neck out for you. I only hope I can pay that forward. Finally, after coming back in 2017, as our worlds and daily lives overlapped more and more, we shared more and more. He was a mentor, leader, and friend. We traveled together. He introduced me to great lifelong friends, many of them here today. It was fun. And as he would say, it was grand. It was what he always loved, working on great things with great people and great friends. That's where you really saw Stephen shine. And oh man, did we work hard and did we have fun? Always both. He wanted that, and he successfully combined it all. I wish we could have continued to reap the rewards of his investment. Stephen's values, his life lessons, his integrity, his caring, leadership style will live on in many leaders he led and has grown, and with which he delivered so many incredible results. His passing has been a tragic shock to me, but it does ignite a deep reminder in me of how big and important our values are and what a difference we can make if we pay it forward. Mentorship, leadership, friendship, or all of them combined. That's how he would want it. Pay it forward to your friends, pay it forward to your family, pay it forward to the young talent around you, pay it forward to our industry. Stephen gave so much of his time and energy and trust to me, and I will forever be thankful for that and for him and for his family. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, it's time for you to meet the rest of the strength and the power and the love that constitutes the Damp family. So ladies, come on up.
Hi, everyone. First of all, on behalf of my family and myself, thank you. Thank you to each and every single one of you for tuning in today to share this incredibly special tribute with us for my dad. And thank you to each and every one of Dad's friends who just shared their beautiful memories and stories with us. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Wayne. And thank you, Max. I want to go off script for a minute because of all of these stories I just heard. And you know, there's no doubt in anyone's mind that my dad knew how to build relationships and build teams, but not just at work. He built our family as a team too. And we are the strongest team right now, and it's just the best. As I'm sure all of you can imagine, deciding on how to spend this 10 or so minutes was a daunting task. How could we do him justice, you know? The words and stories everyone has shared with us over the past 2 weeks have spoke immensely to his character, especially in his professional realm, but also in the way he was a friend and a mentor and a leader to so many of you. So instead, we decided today that we want to share with you a select few and by no means comprehensive amount of special memories and silly stories about my dad. We all know that you knew Dad was a family man, but perhaps you never personally experienced this in this realm of his life.
To start off, the gondola story. He loved trips. It was all about spending quality time as a family, where we could all just disconnect and be together. It didn't matter where we went, although he was definitely a little extra excited when skiing was involved. The gondola rides were the best. Not only would we have smiles from ear to ear, talking about the conditions and laughing about silly things that happened that day, but the assortment of snacks that my dad would consistently pull out of his pocket, never surprised to bring even more laughter to us. Yogurts he would slurp out of the container from his pocket, dry toast from his pocket, hard-boiled eggs from his pocket, just a quick snack, unwrapped granola bars, and the list goes on. It was the best.
So the fact guy. Where did they all come from? None of us really won the genetic lottery on that one, but maybe Alana a little bit. Seriously though, any fact. Music, sports, crosswords, geography, cities, buildings, history, philosophers, and the great political economists, and just life in general. You had a question, he was the man to go to. The only reason I know that the solid wood beams on the ceiling of our cottage came from trees at the bottom of the St. Lawrence River was because my dad told me so. These wood beams will forever remind me of how much I learned from my dad and how much I loved learning from him. We will miss this forever. We will miss this so much, more than words can describe. It was the best.
The Sienese story. When we went to the X for one of my dad's birthdays, maybe about 10 years ago, as soon as we walked in, it was like he was 6 years old, buying all the food he could, the hot dogs, the cotton candy, spending all kinds of money on silly rides for us, and we were all in our 20s. The joy was so incredibly pure because he was both reliving his childhood memories and creating new ones with us. The best part of the day was the excitement he had for this train ride. The train that moved about 1 kilometer an hour. Of course, he knew the name of it and all kinds of other random information about the X. He spent that entire ride sharing his stories with us. Stephen Damp, tour director extraordinaire. It was the best.
Stephen was also a man of faith. Stephen became a Catholic later in life, in his early 40s. I remember my girls saying to him, "Dad, when are you going to get with the program?" He loved his faith, he lived his faith. He was never afraid to say to anyone that no one is perfect, that the last perfect person bled to death on the cross. He embodied his faith in the infinite amounts of love and generosity that he shared with all of us. He freely told me numerous times a day how much he loved me. Please make that something you do to your loved ones, because I carry that with me for the rest of my life. I was truly blessed to have such a humble and selfless husband for almost 33 years. Although he was the first to admit he was not perfect, I could have never asked for a more perfect husband. To me, he was perfect. All he wanted was for us to know how much he loved us and found so much joy in us being happy. He spent his life supporting and encouraging us to be the best we could be. For this, we are forever and eternally grateful. He was the best.
The green eggs. Most men have midlife crises and cope with them by going out and buying a sports car. With my dad, it was green eggs. 1 green egg at the home was just not enough. How are you supposed to perfectly cook your protein and your vegetables at 2 different temperatures and 2 different times with just 1 green egg? So we ended up having 3, 2 of which are at the family cottage. These were a cottage staple. In fact, the cottage itself was a staple in my dad's life. These family places were always so special and meaningful to my dad. This started in his life at a very young age when he spent summer after summer with his grandmother, parents, and siblings at their family farm in Innisfil, Ontario. This physical place and everything it represented to him was always so near and dear to his heart. This continued in his life with my mom's parents' cottage in Parry Sound on Mowat Island, where we had so many special memories with our families as we as kids grew up. Over the last 5 years, we found our own special place in Tiny Township. Dad was on cloud 9 at the cottage all of the time. It was a place that was so full of love and always will be. As a family, learning to cook on green eggs is now on our to-do list for the summer to honor and treasure the memories that we have of our dad. I want to take a moment now to read a poem that we all found really near and dear to our heart that was shared by one of our family friends yesterday. It's called The Broken Chain. We little knew that morning that God was going to call your name. In life we loved you dearly, in death we do the same. It broke our hearts to lose you. You did not go alone, for a part of us went with you the day God called you home. You left us peaceful memories. Your love is still our guide. And though we cannot see you, you're always at our side. Our family chain is broken, and nothing seems the same. But as God calls us one by one, the chain will link again. Now I want to take some time for the thank yous. None of us have ever experienced a loss in our lives of this magnitude before. We could have never anticipated how the memories, words, and stories all of you have shared with us have just touched us so deeply and truly comforted us through this time. It is these memories and stories that we will forever continue to share to keep them alive in our hearts. Thank you to each and every one of you. To our friends and family, to our Miller Paving family, and to our EllisDon family, and many, many more. Thank you so much. And finally, today would not have been possible without Jeff Smith and the EllisDon community. You hosted us and you're organizing all of this, and you continue to support us, and we are forever grateful for that.
Okay, that's it for us, everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I won't make the mistake of trying to add to that. So just for everybody watching, what we're going to do here is stay around for a few minutes and have a beer in Steve's honor. Somebody thought that might be a wise thing to do. I asked which was Steve's favorite beer so we could drink his favorite beer, and the response I got back was whichever one was in front of him. So I think we have a variety of beers to choose from today. But if you are watching, to all of you who are watching, there will be a picture show, which we'll see on the screen here, but this link will stay open, and it will not close until the last person has clicked off externally, or until we get tired of it internally, until we fall from exhaustion. If you'll allow me, I'll just finish with the words of a very brief email I got from a fellow named Jan Dumont. I probably have a terrible accent there, Jan, I apologize, from Bombardier. And Stephen, this is to you as much as to everybody else. He sent it to me the night Stephen passed away. He said, it's hard for me to find words in English, so I'll just say that I mourn with all of you. De tout mon cœur, roughly translated as, with all our hearts. Thank you.